to Bound by Books. I am one of your hosts, writer Danielle Bannister, and I am joined today by writer Marianne Morea, and we are going to be talking about pen names!
Yay!
The good, the bad, and all the reasons why authors use them. Welcome, Marianne!
Welcome, Danielle. Thank you for joining me today, because out of our little quad of authors that we round robin with, you and I are the only ones who have ventured into the world of pen names.
Yes. Yeah. And me very, very recently. So I'll be coming at it from a very newbie perspective, and you can be coming at it at a more seasoned perspective. So we get to the gamut of all of the pitfalls and successes.
I guess so. I mean, yes, my pen names are a little, and I use the plural, pen names, are a little longer in the tooth than yours. So, but not by much. One of them had a very tentative launch because of just not knowing how to do it properly, and I learned how to last summer. You know, even though I had already decided I was going to split my books up, existing books.
And that's something that I think maybe people don't realize, is that you don't just decide to take a pen name. There's a whole sort of marketing plan that needs to go along with it, and it can be a little daunting. So why don't we start with telling us what names you write under, and if maybe they're categorized by a certain genre or something, or if they're just pen names because.
But I want to back up a bit. Back in the day, because you're a whippersnapper compared to
a young whippersnapper.
Back in the day, pen names were a requirement for certain publishing houses, and it was like for example, if you were published by Harlequin. You had to have a pen name, and most people would choose one. I was indie basically right from the get-go, and then got picked up by a small press not shortly after my first book, my first novella was going to be published. I was either going to do it myself in KDP, and then I had a small publishing house pick me up, and they gave me the choice, unlike Harlequin and so forth, which it should have been a red flag from the very beginning, that, if you had, Harlequin was established from for already 40 years. But I decided in my arrogance that I was going to publish under my own name, because I want the success with my name, mostly so I can go back to high school and go to everybody, look at me, And I think maybe that's, you spit in the air of karma, and that's what happens is, you don't have success for a while because karma's like, no. So anyway, but last summer I attended not only InkersCon, and I did so virtually, but I went to Orlando Reads Books, which had a couple of really interesting and informative industry days before it got into the nitty gritty of readers, interacting with readers and so forth. And I took a seminar run by Elena Johnson, and Bonnie Paulson, and the two of them have multiple pen names. I think Bonnie Paulson has 40 pen names or something.
Oh my goodness!
Or maybe that's exaggeration, but 30. Wow. And Elena has a few herself. And when we were talking about it, I had been mulling it over in my head, because I was already starting to decide I was going to get into a different genre. I was going to start writing paranormal women's fiction, and I was going back and forth because I already write paranormal romance. I already write urban fantasy suspense, paranormal romantic suspense. They all kind of straddle those genres. So I thought, all right, well, paranormal women's fiction, it's still paranormal. Why not just keep my pen name? And they said, oh, no. It's a completely different genre. It's still under the umbrella of romance. It's still under the umbrella of paranormal, but there are different parameters. There's a different readership. Somebody that's got paranormal romance, reads paranormal romance is expecting a character in their 20s or maybe early 30s. They're expecting sex in the books, they're expecting a very quick pace. Whereas paranormal women's fiction, the operative words in that sentence are women's fiction, so it's a slower pace. It's the main character is a minimum of 40 something, and there's no sex, in the books at all.
Which is ironic because women in their 40s are horny as all get out. I'm
Yes.
just saying that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying.
You might be hitting a peak there, but in the books, no. Anyway, or you could, and it's just something that it's fade to black or off page.
Right.
Doesn't,
right.
It may happen, but it doesn't happen graphically the way it does in some paranormal romances and urban fantasies and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
Anyway, so that left me with the conundrum of what the hell do I do? I had already put out my first paranormal women's fiction under Marianne Morea, and the instruction that I got was pull it, and then when you have your second book written, which is not done yet,
Yet, operative word, yet.
yes, relaunch it under a pen name. So that's what I plan to do. And I also have YA books that were also published under Marianne Morea, and they're like, oh, big mistake. No, you can't have YA and books with hot sex.
They certainly don't want to be looking at me and my genres then.
So anyway, so I pulled those, and since there were already 3 books in that series, I published them under M.A. Morea. So it's still me. I have Marianne Morea, I have M.A. Morea, and I will now have Marianne Danbury. Danbury is my maiden name. So, and I will publish under that. And now, if I decide to go ahead and do another genre, I may even have another pen name. The problem is all the marketing and everything that goes along with it.
Yes. So I guess like the pro in that case, if we were talking about sort of maybe pros and cons of pen names, a pro would be it's a cleaner thing for readers to discover. If one pen name writes only sort of one genre of material, it's easier for readers to discover and find those books versus somebody like me who writes in about 8 different genres and we're all in the same name. It makes things a little confusing for readers and for those little also bot algorithms.
Yes, I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
They don't know what to, the last book I wrote might have been a, sweet romance. And then the next one that I write is a suspense. Those are not things that are comparable. So did I shoot myself in the foot by not having a pen name and not sticking to one name? But probably I really need to be better about that. And that's a lesson that I've learned recently, is that I really need to be doing better in that. So I've only got the 2 names now. I've decided on 2 lanes instead of 8 genres. I'm now down to 2: romantic suspense and contemporary romance. So my suspense name will be Danielle Bannister, and my contemporary romance going forward will be Danny Bannister, because again, I can barely remember my own name, let alone something fictional. So I had to do a variation on my name. So I stood a chance to know.
Well, I mean, that's something that I always wanted too, which is why I went with M.A. Morea, because Marianne Morea, even though my name is spelt with, you can see behind me, it's one word.
Right.
But it's still Marianne Morea. So M.A. Morea for the YA stuff. Yeah. But I still wanted it to be me too. I didn't want to name, one of my biggest fears is that, I'll be at a convention and there'll be readers and they'll be calling me by the pen name and I won't turn around because it's not something that that sounds like my name. The author Carly Phillips is a very, very successful contemporary romance author, and that is not her real name, obviously.
Yeah.
And she and I lived not too far from each other, so we would meet once in a while for lunch and so forth. And she said she picked Carly because it at least the first sounds like her real name, which is Karen, and at least that way she thought she had a fighting chance of turning around if somebody called her name, so But I guess
Yeah.
you get used to it after a while. You're on. You know what persona you're going to be when you're at an event and so forth. And let's face it, with COVID, there's not so many events anymore. Although they're
Right.
coming back.
Yeah.
Um,
So what would you then say are we kind of I guess we know why we should have the pen names if you're writing in multiple genres, right?
yeah,
If you're writing in multiple genres, it makes sense to have different pen names, even though it pains people to do it. It from a financial standpoint, it makes sense. What are some of sort of the downsides, the pitfalls, the things that make you want to bang your head against the desk when dealing with
the
multiple pen
marketing,
names?
the reinventing the wheel. The you need to have two Facebook groups. You need to have, you know, dual or, double or triple, depending on how many pen names you have,
Yeah.
how much social media marketing you have to do for each one of those pen names. And even if you decide, okay, I am not going to do social media marketing, you still need separate newsletters that you have to send out, because let's face it, having a newsletter and growing your readership organically is something that is a foundation of what we do.
Yeah.
Because if social media goes away, if you have a newsletter, you still have a way of reaching your readers.
Yeah.
If Facebook goes down, or Facebook decides, FCC decides to come down on them and say, you're a monopoly, we are shutting you down. It's not
Right.
like, you're not going to hear a collective scream for
Right.
people who have strong newsletters. You
Right.
will for everybody else.
Right.
So, but
And I know that there are some authors who have some success, and and this is the path that I'm taking because it scares me, of taking their newsletter and trying their best to sort of separate and segment them into sort of two groups so that they can send one newsletter that sort of embodies both pen names, and then through time sort of filter out, these are the ones that might be my contemporary readers, these are the ones who
well,
seem to respond
you
most.
can
Yeah.
do that with segmenting,
Right.
and
Exactly.
groups and so forth. But you would have to boil down your newsletter subscriber list
Yeah.
down to the people who are your one clickers, your fans and your super fans, the people
Yeah.
who are most likely. And then what you do is you poll them, and you
Yep.
say, and you finesse them with, you know reader magnets and so forth. And would you like this, whatever. And there are going to be some people, like for me, if all of a sudden I decided that I wanted to come up with, Jane Doe McPherson, as my new
Right.
pen name for contemporary romance. Most of my readers may not read contemporary romance, because all I've ever written is paranormal.
Yeah.
And so having them, some of them may make the leap, some of them may not.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so I mean, it's, you can do it, you can try and you know uh, finesse your newsletter so that you can segment
Yeah.
it. But you have to be very diligent then of
Yeah.
making sure that you don't accidentally send to your whole
Right.
list,
Right. Yeah.
that you're only
Yeah. Oh,
sending.
you send to the wrong list.
Right.
If you, I think my poor newsletter subscribers, with those hardy bunch that I have, are sort of used to being all over the place with my releases. I think that the ones that I have now they're on board. They're like, whatever you put out, we'll follow you. But it's one of those things that I have to be thinking about going forward, is that I'm actively pursuing reader magnets and trying to get new people into this new pen name. And so it's something that you have to think about, and it's unfortunate that you have to think about it, but you have to think about it. And I have some titles that would fall into contemporary romance that are in my backlog, but have my original name on them. Do I try to pull those and put, so there's all of this
You
mental
can.
stuff.
You
Yeah, but
can.
it's a whole thing that you have to do. So
Once a
when
book
you're
is
thinking
out,
about it, think about those things, right?
yes, and once a book is out there, like I was starting to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
No, that's fine.
apologize.
That's fine.
Um, uh, Once a book is out there, it's very hard to reel it back in. I just
Yeah.
went through that with Jeepers Reapers, and I had it was originally published into Marianne Morea. I still have 6 copies of it on my shelf that I will going to keep for posterity.
Yeah.
But eventually it will have. The cover's redone. I just haven't,
Right.
and it's now up
and
on
it'll live
Amazon
on Goodreads forever.
Forever. And the thing with Goodreads is, unlike your newsletter, or unlike Amazon KDP, where you can have your pen names all in the same dashboard, you can't do that on Goodreads. Goodreads, you need to separate it out and have a completely different account, which is, you would think they would kind of
it's not user friendly at all. So yeah, you've got to log out, log back in, and it's a nightmare situation. So if you're tackling a pen name, maybe start with one. See if you can handle one. I don't know how somebody would handle more than 3. I mean, that 30 and 40. How would you brain that? They've got to be KDP only, right? No, I don't know.
No. I mean, and I have a feeling some of their pen names just, once their books and their series hit a cliff, they kind of just let them hang out there in the ether, and they concentrate on something else. I don't know. I just don't have the wherewithal or the time to do that.
And people like that probably will also have assistants that can help make sure
that
they have, the right things in place for sure. So I wanted to ask you about something, because I know a lot of you actually have initials for author names, and you've indicated why you have it. I have another friend of mine who was a guest host on this program not too long ago, RJ Keller. That's not her real name, but she used that because she wanted to not let it be known,
she was female,
obviously, that she was female, because there is this stigma that female writers are not good writers.
I don't know about
in the category that she's
right.
She's writing is wider general, and specific. That is a thing that I wanted to ask your opinion about. So,
mystery thriller, detective, mystery thriller, that type of suspense.
Mm-hmm.
The James Patterson type esque books, the Clancy's and that kind of stuff. Yeah, those are male dominated. So if you want to use initials, you can. I didn't think about that when I did M.A. Morea for my young adult. I did it because I wanted to keep the continuity, because those books, the first book in that series, had been published in 2012, or 2013, and then 2 years later, the next book, and 2 years later, the book after that. So by 26, or not even, it was like a year later, whatever. So by 2016, all 3 books were written. And that's 2016. It's now 2022. I just decided to change all this last summer. So the books had been out for a while, and I didn't want people who were fans of that series to be confused. Right. So I still needed it to be linked in such a way. But the good news with that is that on Author Central, you now can you don't have to, you can create the pen names very easily now and have everything linked to so they're starting to make things a little easier in that respect. So look, to pen name or not to pen name, that is the question, I think. And I think it has to do with a lot of different nuances. It has to do with your own personal comfort zone, and whether or not you want people to know what you're writing. If you're writing seriously dirty stuff, you may not want your children or your husband's, or husband or your family to know that this is what you're doing, because it may cause problems for you, may cause embarrassment or what have you.
Right.
With me, I didn't give a crap. I didn't. It was just like this.
Take me as I am. That's it.
I write this, like it or don't like it. You and I think have talked about people in our families reading some of our stuff, and you're like, they want to discuss it. And you're like, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then there's an argument that you could make too, that if you do write in multiple genres, and you are maybe writing some very sexy stuff, but you're also writing clean young adult, there could be some readers who are looking for work by you, and they stumble across, and
Right.
that
That's the other thing.
on either end, they could be like, "Wait, that's not spicy stuff,"
Right,
or
right.
"Wait, that's spicy stuff." You know, it could be either way. And I'm curious if you had brought up. We were talking about initials. I was wondering, do you think the opposite is true for the romance genre, for males who might write in the romance genre? Do you think they might be tempted to initial their names as well, for fear that romance readers might think, "Oh, he's a guy. What can he know about romance?"
Right. I don't know about that. I think maybe yes. Um, I think it really depends if you're, like if you're a guy and you're writing romance, but you're writing gay romance, you might want to have a male
That's true.
name,
Yeah.
you know. But if you're just a regular guy writing romance and you're writing from a female's point of view, you may want to do the initials so that
Right.
people don't prejudice themselves against
Right.
you before they even crack the spine.
Right.
It's
Right.
before they even open and read the first paragraph of chapter one. You don't
Yeah.
want somebody to be prejudiced against what you're doing and what you're writing simply by virtue of the name that's across the bottom or the top of your
Right.
book.
I mean, there are so few male names in romance that I can even think of, so that it makes me wonder if there has to be some men writing under the pen name of initials for that purpose.
I'm sure there
It
are.
just
I don't
it's
know any.
yeah. It's just
Actually,
an interesting thing
yeah.
that popped into my head while we were
Off the
talking.
top of my head, I don't know anybody. I'm sure
No.
there are, and I'm sure I've met them on
Yeah.
Clubhouse, and I'm sure
Right.
I probably chatted with them on Clubhouse, but off the top of my head, I don't know.
Right.
So,
For clarity's sake, for those who might be listening and maybe are not very familiar with sort of the writing world, sometimes I see these two terms used together, and I think maybe people don't realize that there's a very big difference in the terms of using a pen name and having a ghost writer. I think
mm,
sometimes people think those are the same thing. Do you want to clarify to people if they don't
yes,
quite
there's
know
a
the
huge
difference?
difference.
Yeah,
A ghostwriter is somebody that you hire to write for you, and then you slap your own name on it.
right.
It's
Real or pen.
yeah, and it is a well entrenched practice
Mhm.
in the book world.
Yeah,
Um, you know, uh,
a lot of authors that you
big
might
name
read.
authors, yeah, big name authors, you're reading the books and that you absolutely love, and the person whose name is on it may not be the actual person who wrote that book. They may have critiqued it, they may have given the ghostwriter the bare bones of the
Yeah,
story,
they might have given
or
them an outline
right,
or
or
synopsis.
in a situation where I did ghostwriting at one point, um, I spoke with the author for maybe about an hour to get a feel for the story. It was like part of series, so I kind of knew the flow, the ebb and flow of the story, and one of the characters that she wanted in the story because it was a character, but the other characters, the world, that these books were going to be published in, was my own creation. I'm the one who created the world. I'm the one who created the characters and so forth, except for one character in one instance.
And
It
so, as a ghostwriter, do you just get paid that one sort of a flat fee, and then
depends. It depends on how you negotiate. I did it. It was a fee per word. It was 8 cents a word. And so if you're writing a book that's a novella that's 40,000 words, do the math. If you're doing a
right?
book, there are some people who are so good at it and have such a and they're just known kind of in the whispers in the corners of the dark corners of the book world, that they'll come and they can charge as much as 15 or
Sure,
$20,000 a book,
sure.
and but in essence those are far and few between, and there are some organizations out there that you'll look up if you Google ghostwriters, that'll say come write for us. And at one point I just for shits and giggles I went in to look and see, and it was like less than a quarter of a penny a word.
Jeez.
And it was like you'd have to write hundreds of thousands of words in order to even make like $200. and it was completely, it was just not worth it. It was like a complete scam. And you
Right.
know that they probably had big name authors that are on the other end that were
Sure.
reaping the benefits of your work. Now,
Right.
look, I sound very not bitter, but just eyes wide open instead of eyes wide shut. I did it initially because I thought it would be it was an experience and it was decent
Sure.
money at the time. Um, if I was not an author, where I had books out with my own name, I probably wouldn't have cared. But because I had books out with my own name and because I built the worlds and because I created the characters, it was soul sucking to see the reviews that came out, knowing that the work was mine and not them, not
Mm.
theirs. So, it's to each his own. To
Right.
each his
Yeah.
own.
Sure. Sure.
It's not for me. Now the
Right.
difference is that it's not a pen name. It's you doing
Right.
work for hire.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
So
Cole,
yeah, just I wanted to. Sometimes I hear new authors talking and they don't maybe necessarily know the difference, and so if we can educate, then
yes, and it's like
more power to us.
it's a business. You know what I mean? It's a business, and you have to go into it if you decide that you want to ghostwrite for somebody. Make all I can say is make sure that you have an ironclad contract. And you can even build in clauses that say that if the book that you have ghostwritten sells more than X amount of copies, that you are entitled to a bonus. You
Mhm.
know,
Sure.
and if it hits one of the lists, USA Today or New York Times or what have you, that you are also then entitled to
Right.
compensation, a
Right.
bonus of some kind. It all depends on how you work your contract. Don't just sign something that's boilerplate if after you've had some experience doing this.
Right.
The other thing is that it's kind of a fine line. You have experience doing something, but then you sign a non-disclosure, agreement because the NDA, you can't tell somebody else, oh yeah, well I wrote that book for so and
Yeah.
so because then it
Yeah.
breaks your non-disclosure.
That defeats the purpose of hiring a
So,
ghostwriter. It's
so
supposed to be anonymous, and you're not supposed to
yeah,
know that somebody else wrote your work. But at the end of the day, those who ghostwrite, they're making money writing, and
it's a
there's no
personal choice.
shame in making money writing. Um, they're probably making more money than I am writing. So it's we got to pay the bills somehow, right? And no shame at all.
No, it's a personal choice. I just chose not to do it anymore simply because it was just like I said,
How long did you do it?
about 4 years.
Wow. I did not know that about
Yeah,
you. Look
about
at that.
four
We learn
years.
something new every day. Look at that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know as I could do it either because there is that, like this is my baby. I raised it. And I put it out into the world and I want to see how you do. And then to not be able to have the credit. I
I
want
think
the credit.
it might be a different story if I had been given an ironclad outline with all of
Mm,
the characters already delineated, their personal characteristics in terms of their
right.
physical
More
characteristics,
of the heavy lifting had been
their
done.
character traits, the world had already been built, that type of thing. I probably would have felt like all I was doing was kind of filling in the blanks,
Right. Right.
whereas then I would be okay with that. But because I built the worlds and the character wrote, created the characters, named them, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like I said, soul sucking.
Yeah, I
So
can see that. As for a creative who wants to do that as their own passion, I can see that. But for somebody who's wanting to just is great at telling stories and just wants the money, hey, it's a
yep,
great way to do it.
yep.
Okay,
Anyway,
I'm gonna pull a little share on you.
share.
If I could turn back time, okay, what would you tell your younger self?
Snap out of it. No.
It's still that reference. What would you tell your younger self, starting out? Before starting, would you say, "Hey, think about
Pen
a
name.
pen name"?
I
You
would.
you you would you would
I
say,
absolutely would go back in time and give myself the snap out of it and and get rid of the arrogance and be like, put a pen name up there, and I wouldn't have used my own name. I would have used a pen name because then it wouldn't have mattered then what other pen names I came up with because there wouldn't have to be any kind of a link.
So you
and
wouldn't have used your real name at all?
I
Is
don't
that
know
what
if
you're
I
saying?
may have used Marianne, but I wouldn't have used Morea. And
Interesting.
I don't know. I may have gone something very snooty and been like Elizabeth St. George or something like that. I don't know what I would have done.
So you would have wanted to hang on to maybe some more of the anonymity of
Yes.
people not knowing that you were you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's at least this way then I would have had the freedom to move about the cabin in any way I wanted in terms of, changing lanes,
Right.
instead of
Right.
having to worry about, having everything under one name. I wish I had more access to writers who had been involved in our world, the indie world. But at the time that I came into the indie world was in its own throes of birthing throes. It
Right.
hadn't really. It was still in the larval stage. Nobody
Right.
cared. Nobody
Yeah.
kind of knew.
Nobody knew nothing back then.
So
Nobody knew.
I mean,
When did you start writing?
I started writing in 2010
Yeah.
and published my first book like in 2011.
Yeah. So
I just had the 10th.
same time frame as
Yeah.
yeah. So,
So
it was this journey of discovery. Nobody knew what the right methods were. Nobody knew this was the way to do things.
Well, in the indie world, because nobody in the trad world, they kept all that stuff very close to the breast. They didn't share. They didn't share.
That's right.
So no, and it's and that's I think part of why as an indie organization, an indie world, not organization, a lot of us, we pass it we pass it forward. We share
Yeah.
the love.
Yeah,
Because
that was a very big thing when I was starting out. Is indies really were lifting each other up, and it
we
wasn't
still are. In
me
fact,
against you. Yeah.
I was just on Clubhouse and we were talking about paranormal women's fiction and having heroines and female main characters that were 40 plus, and in some instances even 50 plus. And um, everybody, all the authors that were on, including, and I felt bad for the guys that were in the chat, because they were like kind of like, all right, I'm not touching this one with a 10-foot pole. But everybody was like, oh my god, my readers really like that, because my readership tends to skew 40 older, or 40 plus and whatnot. And now there are trad publishers that are looking for older MCs, older main characters. And meanwhile, indies now have been doing it for a while. So we are definitely on the cutting edge, because we have the freedom to be able to do things when we want to do them and get them out, like lightning fast. Whereas a trad publishing, you get a deal for a trad book deal, and it could take a year or two before that book sees the light of day. So
Absolutely.
we are definitely on the threshold of new trend, and the trad publishers are taking notice. What kind of gets my goat is that they take notice and then they claim it. Well, we're doing this now, and then the whole world is like, oh my god. Meanwhile, we've been doing it for years.
Right.
So it's still a little bit of a war.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the whole pen name thing. I think if I had told myself, I probably would have said, yeah, either consider a pen name or stay in one lane.
Yes.
And that, if I had thought, I probably would have just picked one lane to stay in, because I think that would be exponentially easier.
And write faster. That's the other thing I would tell myself. Write faster.
Yeah, so that's the sort of caveat with a pen name, is that you're giving yourself extra homework, and as an indie author, you're giving yourself a lot of homework anyway. Yeah. But if you're taking on a pen name, you're giving yourself essentially double homework.
Yeah.
If you do it, cleanly. I mean, there are ways to sort of. Well, I have not done it cleanly.
you would look up. You would do your research, do your due diligence, and you know, whatever genre you're deciding you want to write in, after, you know, as a secondary genre, you would deconstruct a couple of the books that are bestsellers, and you'd see where they're being published, the kind of covers they have, the blurbs they have, you know, are they all KDP? Are they not? And you know, just,
and you have to think about the branding of the different pen names. Are you going to have a different, you know, font name for your pen name? Is it going to be the same on all your covers? And are you going to, like, when you do your covers, are they going to sort of match, you know, thematically, brand wise? So it's, you're considering all sorts of different factors now that maybe you didn't have to consider before. So it's definitely, it's daunting, but
doable
and probably for your benefit. If you can, you know,
because once you get the algorithm or the also bought algorithms and you start growing readership, there may be a crossover. You know, there may be a crossover, and if not, then you have two groups of people clamoring for your work. And that's what we. That's
well,
all
and
we
you
can
could use a crossover book sort of to your advantage, right? You could lead those that this group over to these books with that one crossover book. So there is, you know, a place even for a book that could sort of fit on either side.
Absolutely.
But if you write in 8 completely different genres that are not connected at all, you have a problem.
Danielle.
You have a problem, and maybe you should look into that.
No, you don't have a problem, my dear. You don't have a problem, my dear. You just have a very, very creative mind.
I just let my muse go where my muse wants to go instead of reining her. It's really what I have is a lack of discipline. When it comes to my muse.
You have a muse with ADHD.
I let her play, and I probably shouldn't. I should probably put that little children's gate around her and say, no, play in the living room. This is where we're playing, not the backyard.
Anyway, well, I think that does it for us today. To pen name or not to pen name? That is the question. And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
You probably should.
So be sure to listen next week as we talk about all things books, writing, and all the things we love in Bound by Books. So for now, from me to you, and from Danielle to all of you, ta-ta. And
see you next week.
Bye.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.